So, Taylor, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yes. So my name is Taylor Thomas, and I have, let's see, where to begin. I run a business slash ministry, and it's called Terraform Apologetics. And we seek to train Christians to share the gospel creatively. Uh, I want to help Christians be able to understand how to share the gospel in the everyday network of their relationships and not just feeling like it's out on the street. And we also want to train Christians to be able to represent the Christian faith in a good way, in a creative manner that's kind of suited to the person that they are, who God
Mm.
has them to be. And then we also want to try to help Christians be able to creatively express and defend the Christian faith. So that's our aim. And there's just so much to what we desire to do and how we want to reach people, how we want to train. It's a business ministry that we are seeking to try and terraform. When I say that, I mean we long to help people understand how to creatively navigate and build a better world, build better communities that are uh, for suitability to be able to help human flourishing. So we can do that through the gospel. We can do that through the Christian faith.
Well, that's awesome. So I'll just go ahead and say it because I forgot to. Welcome to the Faith Forum podcast. Um, so, Taylor, uh, what caused you to want to start a ministry?
Okay, so um, I've worked in ministry, some ministry context for probably about almost 20 years, 15 to 20 years. And it's the story that God has given me. My with my background and how God saved me, I have always had a passion to share the gospel. I've always had a desire for people to know who Jesus is, and so God has just impressed it upon me based on I think how He saved me and what I've learned through studying Scripture that I want other people to be able to represent Christ well. And there's so much going on in the world right now, and for Christians here in the West, it seems like it's very challenging. The I would say that the climate, let's say the spiritual climate, and the Christian subculture that exists, it can be difficult for people because of what they're conditioned to, difficult for them to feel like they know how to navigate defending the Christian faith, how to navigate being able to share the gospel with the people in their everyday lives. It's something I think that at times is very foreign because in Christian subculture, uh, there's often a mindset of it seems like we're part of a social club, and it's not necessarily as I'm part of a community of believers and I want other people to know who Jesus is. I want other people to um, connect and have a real relationship with the living God. I think that that's something people may have that in their minds, but they're not sure how to bridge that. And so, just with the background God has given me, I all over the course of time, I want very much to be able to connect with people and to help them feel like this is accessible. Sharing the gospel, defending the faith, these are things that, therefore, me, I can do this in the midst of my everyday relationships.
Okay. So you mentioned your testimony a little bit. Why don't you share that with us?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I love sharing my story. God has been, I say this often, a master craftsman in bringing me into the fold and making me a part of the church. And so, uh, gosh, I have a blended family and a broken background. Going back, my parents were divorced when I was about 3, 4 years old, and and both my parents got remarried. My mom got remarried when I was about 6, and my dad when I was 16. But in the midst of that, I have an older sister, older brother, younger stepbrother, and stepsister. And in the course of just being a teenager, looking up to my brother, I got mixed into some crowds, into some people that didn't influence me well. And I was involved in drugs, alcohol. I was involved in pursuing life that was for me. I didn't spend much time concerning myself with what other people needed or the context. Or I wasn't necessarily raised to be conscious of other people's emotions or to be aware in a way that I might consider what is in the best interest of the person in my friends or people around me. I was out for me. I was living for myself. So when I was about 14 years old, that's when I started into drinking. I started into drugs. I was treating girls like objects rather than treating them as real people that deserve dignity and respect. And so for several years, I was on this trajectory. I was getting into trouble with the police at times, and I had probation. I had different things that were issues that we caused my brother and I both some difficulty for my dad, and it was very challenging. He was a single parent at that particular time. He hadn't been remarried yet, and so he was trying to. My dad was trying to go back to school and working full time, and so he always worked hard, and we were just kind of oftentimes doing our own thing in our own time, pursuing what we wanted. So it got to the point where my dad, he was like, I can't do this anymore. He got remarried, and then I moved in. My dad and I moved in. By this time, my sister and my brother were both out of the house. Older sister, older brother. We moved in, and now we were with my dad, my stepmom, and my stepbrother and stepsister. New family dynamic. So we lived there in an apartment for some time, and then what happened was it reached the point where my dad was like, I can't do this anymore. So he said, we're going to move, and we're moving to a new home. Now, I didn't want to move away because it was like a half an hour away from where I grew up. It wasn't very far, but I couldn't drive, didn't have access to all the friendships that I grew up with. And everybody else in my family graduated from the same high school. So it was kind of like, it was a little like unnerving for me to start. And this was at this point in my junior year, not at the start of, but in the midst of my junior year of high school. So you can imagine the level of like awkwardness, fitting in, like wanting to find people that I connect with. And so we moved into a new house. And here I am in this dynamic trying to navigate being in a new school with all these different people. It wasn't as diverse ethnically as the school that I came from. Um, and so it was challenging at first, but it didn't take me too long to connect with the same sorts of people. And in fact, I got into the same things that I was already doing. The same drugs, drinking, same issues as before. And this went on for several months. And I had developed some friendships. I got into a relationship with a girl. And what's interesting is Elliot, I had been in relationships with girls like numerous times over the years. And so, I mean, I just hopped from one person to the next. And it was interesting with this particular relationship. I only dated this girl for a couple of months, but somehow I was very emotionally caught up. And what happened was she broke up with me. That was maybe after 2 or 3 months. And it was crazy how it affected me. I was just totally thrown off. Personally, I felt empty. I was like, I was, I felt an emotional void. There was so much turmoil within me. I didn't understand what the heck was going on. I'm like, what is this? In my mind, I had difficulty sleeping. I had a little bit of trouble eating. I don't have trouble eating. I eat like a horse, at that time.
Yeah.
And so it was like, what is it that's going on? So what happened was then within me, God was working and using this. And looking back, I can see and understand within me was this emptiness. So what I set out to do was to try and get this girl back. I thought in my mind, let me try and pursue bettering myself so that she'll want me back in the course of like a year. So what I did was all of a sudden I tried to change the way that I dressed a little bit, and I tried to be into academics intensely in schools, try to study, try to focus, try to get my attention in the right place and improve myself basically. And I started to try and dabble in philosophy a little bit, took some books out of the library, and I came across something intrigued my interest. This is something I had as an interest from the past. A guy named Malcolm X. So he was a leader in the Nation of Islam back in the 50s, 60s, and he was always a person of interest to me. So I started to read his autobiography, and I wasn't a huge reader. This book, his life story, it was like 600 plus pages long. All right, this is a thick read, and for me, I'm like, this is not something I normally do. But I couldn't put the book down. I picked it up and I was reading it. So as I'm reading it, I'm reading the story, the transformation. I'm reading the history that's there, and I was heavily influenced, and through that I kind of began a journey where I then started to delve into Islam, and I got a book out on Islam, the misunderstood religion, and I started to read, and I was trying to understand and process, and in some manner, I then was very devoted for a portion of several months, where I chose to be a Muslim and try to follow things as religiously, follow things as much as I could. And so this went on for a couple of months, where I was even telling my friends and my teachers in school, I wanted them to believe and think the way that I thought at that particular time, because that was something that was significant to me. So what happened was, interestingly enough, there are similarities existing between Judaism, between Islam. The Ten Commandments, are some things that are a similar, let's say, similar uh, level of importance, right? So I understood through Islam, I was convicted, and I knew that I was guilty. I knew I was a sinner. It didn't take too much for me to reflect on my past and my history, and to know the way I had treated other people, the things that I had done. I had stolen, I had lied. Those were things that, like, no surprise. Those were issues that were a part of my story. So I felt this intense level of just this measure of guilt. And I tried to do whatever I could to focus and be devoted in a way that I felt like was going to be significant enough for me to live, and somehow maybe offset, let's say, all the things that I had done that had brought guilt on me, the laws that I had broken, God's laws, the basic moral laws within me. So this went on. I was devoted doing this for several months, and one night I had a friend who was going to come pick me up, and we were just hanging out that evening. Beforehand, I had gotten a Bible from somebody, and it had systematic study questions in the back of it. And so, excuse me, this my stepsister actually gave it to me. She hadn't read it, but she had received it, and she passed it on to me, and I was interested. Okay, let me see what's in there that's maybe different than Islam. And one night, as I'm getting ready to get picked up, I open up, and I can't remember what it was exactly that I was looking for, but I was very interested in trying to figure out, something that the Bible had said. So I opened it up, and I found the systematic study questions at the back. This is the first time I'm cracking open a Bible, as far as I can remember. And so as I'm looking through, I'm seeing it's talking about a basic plan of salvation. It's talking about, interestingly enough, it acknowledged that I was a sinner. And I knew that because I had broken God's laws. But then it went on to tell me, not only was I a sinner, it didn't just leave me there. It told me that God loved me, and that the evidence of that, the demonstration, was that Jesus Christ came as God's son, and he offered himself as a sacrifice. He died for me. He died on my behalf. That Elliott blew me away. And the reason partly was because I knew already I was a sinner with Islam.
Yeah.
And it teaches that God is benevolent or all loving. But that's not there. Beyond that, it wasn't anything personal. There was nothing personal about it. And I felt no freedom from guilt. I felt no freedom from the burden that was on my shoulders. I just felt like I needed to do whatever I could to maybe please God, but there was nothing there was no promise of eternal life, no promise of forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this internal turmoil, but now all of a sudden things are stirring in a different way. And as I continue reading, it talks about if I believed in Jesus and what he had done, that I could be forgiven and have eternal life. That was something that blew me away. So, okay, so I'm still now in my mind, I'm kind of like in this awkward place of just in between Islam and this person of Jesus. So my friend picks me up and we hang out for a couple of hours. I get back at 10 o'clock at night and my mind is swirling as I'm hanging out with this friend of mine. And I feel like there's just this war going on in my head almost. I come back and for 2 hours from like 10 o'clock at night to midnight, I'm reading my Bible. I'm reading and trying to understand. I'm devouring. I'm soaking it up. I wake up the next morning, same thing, and I'm just digging in. Somewhere along that weekend, I put my trust in Jesus and what he had done in order to be forgiven in God's sight. I couldn't articulate it in that way at that particular time. There wasn't anybody holding my hand and walking me through it. But these basic things that I was reading about, as I'm reading these questions and answers and then flipping to passages in the Bible, it's just Jesus Christ becomes the clearest person in the universe to me. And over the course of the next week, a new world just opens up and everything is brand new. Like in a way that I was experiencing life in a way that I had never before. Old things were falling away, old desires and stuff like that they were fading in light of this new person, in light of this newfound freedom and forgiveness. So I was on the bus on Friday. Okay, that's when that's when I began to open the Bible that night. But I was on the bus on Friday telling people all praises due to Allah. I come on the bus on Monday morning and I'm telling people Jesus Christ is Lord. So my friends are like, some of the people on the bus are laughing at me. They're like, dude, what are you going to be next week? Like, and it's interesting because at that time, I didn't care. I didn't give a rip what they were thinking about me or what they were saying about me because Jesus was so real and I knew this was true, that it didn't matter what anybody else said or thought. I was entirely convinced. And then I went into study hall that same Monday. And I had my Bible and I'm reading it in study hall, right? So I'm reading it and another student walks up to me that I'd never talked to before. And he begins to communicate to me and he's like, so, hey, dude, what you reading? I'm like, the Bible. And he's like, well, why are you reading that? And in my brain, I'm like, why is he asking me these questions? This is kind of strange. I said, well, I'm reading because I'm a Christian. And he's like, hey, so am I. So then he shares John 1:12 with me, the first verse anyone ever shared with me, and it sticks with me to this day. But to all who believed, to those who receive him, to them he gave the right to become the children of God. So he explained to me then now that I had the right, I had the power to become God's child because I had put my trust in Jesus, because I had believed in his name. And so like, again, this is revelation to me. This is brand new. So a beautiful understanding. So then he invites me, this is my friend Gary. He invites me to youth group. And I went that Thursday and then just life from there just changed. I wasn't gonna go to church at first, right? There was a youth leader there. She was like, hey, you gonna come to church on Sunday? I was like, nah, I'm not gonna go to church. And she said to me, here's what she said, right? What do you think most people might say, right? If I said, yeah, just, I believe in Jesus, but I don't want to go to church, right? Most people in church might say to you, and I could understand this. They might be like, well, you really should come to church. It's a good idea to do that, right? Or God wants you to do that. And while that's true, Here's how she bridged it. She said, "You're right. You don't have to go to church to go to heaven." She's like, "But it's good for you to be with other believers in a community. And there's so many beautiful things about it." So I remember her name, Jen, the youth leader at that time. She shares that with me, and she had a bubbly personality. What a beautiful person. And she invited me. So then I decided, you know what? I'm going to go with Gary and his family. So I went, and I was just, I loved it. The whole experience was amazing. God began to transform me. Like this work that's taking place, I began to share the gospel. The transformation that took place was just crazy at that particular time. And God was making me a new person. I was making surveys and going into my classes early and setting surveys on the desk and asking students to fill these surveys out because I wanted to share the gospel with them. And so, like, lots of things changed. My wardrobe, I got rid of old video game system. At that time, that was something I believed I needed to do to shift from who I was and make an utter break to now this person that I believed I needed to be. Did I make all the right decisions at that time? No. A lot of it was a lot of zeal, but not a lot of wisdom or knowledge, right? But the passion was there, and it was out of desire because of this new relationship, this new person I discovered, and my desire for other people to know Jesus and how real he is, that I was doing a lot of the things I did. So I was sharing the gospel with kids in school. Some kids actually even believed in Jesus. And like, this was just something, I went through some discipleship with my youth pastor and with my pastor at church and different things going on. But a lot of it was motivated because of the work that God was doing in me. And so that was kind of the start of the journey, I believe, of God calling me and bringing me into um, this new path and this journey towards wanting other people to know Jesus and wanting to be able to train people to know that even now in the last couple of years, having finished with seminary, um, I want to help train other people to feel confident in what they believe and to know why what they believe is true. Not just to know what maybe it is that they should believe according to what scripture teaches, but to know why what they believe is true and that it's reasonable. It doesn't have to just be, well, I'm basing this on what someone else told me, but I really can't give you any value as to why this actually works out in reality beyond just words that are penned down. Like, no, this is stuff, if we think about it logically, this stuff is real, it's true. And I want you to understand that the Christian faith is the truest representation of the world around us, of reality. So,
Okay. Wow. That's an amazing testimony.
yeah, thanks for asking. I love sharing.
So, became a Christian in high school, and then what'd you do after high school?
So I had someone who, in the same church family, a family that I had a couple different families that took me in and acted like spiritual family, spiritual parents in a way. And one individual in particular, he said that he was like, "Hey, have you ever considered going to Bible college?" And I was like, as we talked about it, I was like, you know what? That sounds awesome. I would love to do that. And this same individual was a mentor to me because actually I had gone through a program called Child Evangelism Fellowship. That's where I first learned to really share the gospel, where I just developed the what I believe to be my office / gift within the church, according to Ephesians 4, is to be an evangelist. And so to help train and equip other believers for that. So that happened in my senior year of high school, actually in between, what was it? Yeah, it was after my senior year when I graduated, I worked with Child Evangelism Fellowship. And then the following summer as well, I interned with them. And we were doing backyard Bible clubs and sharing the gospel with kids. And it just, man, the training was awesome. Beautiful experience. I would recommend it for any youth. Um, but I went into Bible college. At that time, Philadelphia College of the Bible. Then it changed while I was there to Philadelphia Biblical University. Now it's known as Cairn University. So there's been some iterations over the time. I think I have 3 different degrees reflected from all the different names. So my resume looks like, oh, look at all these schools he's been to. Actually, it's all
Yeah.
the same school, but great school, great training. And so I went to Bible college, 2 years in northern New Jersey at a satellite campus that they had at that time, and then 2 years down in the Philadelphia area, finishing up at the main campus. So yeah, that's what and during that time, that's kind of when also the missionary mindset came to me, because I met some folks working at a church up in North Jersey. I interned up there, and yeah, a large church, mega church setting.
Mhm.
I interned with a kind of youth program, youth and young adults, and met a guy that I connected with, and we started to talk about missions and ministry. And then he moved with a group of people out to central Pennsylvania, which is where I am now. And I actually, excuse me, I came out and I moved to Pennsylvania after college to be a part of the same group. And I worked kind of at a youth center. There's so many things that have happened. I've gone overseas to several different countries. You know, I've been involved with some interesting. I've got some interesting stories. But my wife and I lived overseas in India for 6 months. I was able to be in Africa, in Uganda, in Sudan, in the war-torn area of southern Sudan, and I was with a guy, actually, Sam Childers. There's a movie about him called Machine Gun Preacher,
Oh, yeah.
and I think Gerard Butler plays his character. But at any rate, I was able to be there 2 different times with him, which is, I guess, my maybe claim to fame. I got to hold the camera when Dateline NBC. I think there's a Keith. I forget the guy's name. This guy named Keith with Dateline NBC. Anyway, came in to interview him, and I got to hold the camera. I'm nowhere in the picture. I got to hold some lighting or something like that. Um, but anyway, I got to be involved in like rescuing some children, orphans from some war-torn areas, and bringing them back to the compound orphanage area where Sam Childers had established to help people who were in that situation. So so I just some crazy journey things along the way. But then I joined back in 2004. I moved out to central Pennsylvania and became a part of a ministry that I was with from 2004 until 2019. And now I have gone off on my own with my wife, and we worked now in kind of the, let's say, just normal everyday business, working at a Walmart distribution center for several years, going back to school, to seminary, and now trying to launch this business ministry to help train people. So just a history of some experience there, a lot of stories along the way.
Yeah. Uh, did you go to all those different countries with an organization or on your own?
Yeah, so let's see, I went with the mission organization that I was a part of at that time. And so it was, we connected, a lot of it actually it wasn't with any particular group. It was as a missions organization. We went as representatives ourselves. We connected with some people on the ground who were doing work there. Like in India, we were with a group who they're actually native there. This gentleman, pastor, missionary, and his wife, they live in India, and they're indigenous. They were born and raised there, etc. Um, so we were there with him, visiting a couple different times, and then my wife and I chose to go and live there for 6 months and try to help train some pastors on the ground to be a part of some of the work there. We've always had a desire to kind of have a missional mindset and go and help connect other people and be a part of what's going on elsewhere. And so, not with any particular outside organization, but just as the group that we were a part of. Yeah.
Okay. So, where did you go to seminary?
I went to Southern Evangelical Seminary. Yeah, I graduated. I finished in, it was January of 2023. So I just finished about a year ago is when they officially graduated me. And I got my master's degree in Christian apologetics.
Okay. Um, are they a part of any particular denomination? Or you're
No, it's yeah, non-denominational.
okay.
Yeah,
Uh,
actually, Norm Geisler, the guy who helped found the school, he and another gentleman, Norman Geisler is his name. He is made. He's a very well known, I would say, in Christian circles, a significant figure in that he's written a tremendous amount of books, done a tremendous amount of training, started this school, taught at Dallas Theological Seminary for some time, a part of training a lot of people over the years. And Norman Geisler has his son has started a ministry. So there's so many different things there, but the guy is sharp as a tack. He passed on. He went on to be with Jesus. Just as I was actually starting my degree and I was going to have a class with him, he had passed away just prior to that. So I kind of missed that connection with him personally. But the school is top notch. The price is down here in comparison, but the education is way up here. And so it was all done online, which is wonderful. They're based in Matthews, North Carolina, right outside of Charlotte. But I recommend it to anyone. Beautiful, beautiful program.
Okay. So I think I know the answer to this question, but I go ahead and ask anyways. Why apologetics?
Gosh, so the times that we live in right now, I mean, okay, part of it, let's just say, part of how God designed me is a very analytical thinker. Okay, so my mind thinks about like, okay, well, why is it this way? Or, you know, I'm the type of person that would watch television and listen to the commercials and be like, you're not telling me the whole truth. Okay, here's what I heard you say, but here's what you didn't say in what you said. That's just kind of my brain. My brain has a tendency to work that way. So I even have to be careful personally of just my desire to argue with people for the sake of being right or arguing. I'll admit that's one of my flaws or weaknesses. But God is he's still working on me. But part of the another aspect of just my desire is also sincerely to really want in apologetics, it's making a ready defense of the Christian faith. And I like another guy says, J. Warner Wallace, who's a cold case homicide detective based out of California. He calls it being making a case, okay, making a case for the Christian faith and for who Jesus is. And so I have a desire with apologetics, with a ready defense. 1 Peter 3:15 talks about that we should always be ready to give a defense for the hope that we have. And so that hope that exists, that lives within us, we can be ready and prepared because especially we live in a world that's very dark, a lot of hostility towards Christianity. People may just even have issues with Christian subculture, but they can't necessarily, a lot of people don't make a distinction between and this is the same, it can be true about any religious representation or any organization in general. People may have difficulty distinguishing between the individual members and maybe the subculture surrounding a particular organization or religion and the actual truth of that religion. And so anybody can be kind of mischaracterized or caricatured. And so I want people to understand, Christians, that there is a way to be able to represent the Christian faith, to be able to defend the Christian faith and not feel like this doesn't need to be, even the word defense, I try to be careful about the words I use because defense immediately sounds like you're in a battle. And it's true that, we are, in a sense, in the Christian world, there's a warfare. We're battling with it's a battle of ideas, and Paul talks about that too, even in 2 Corinthians 10. It's this idea of we want to be able to tear arguments down. When people raise arguments against the Christian faith, for us to be able to dismantle those arguments. Why? Not because we're trying to just prove somebody else wrong, but the point is because, well, like I said earlier, the Christian faith is actually the most reasonable explanation for why the world is the way that it is, and we want to dismantle these false arguments and this false narrative that comes against the Christian faith, so that we can have basically clearing the bushes out of the way, clearing the obstructions, so people can see and have a more clear view of the cross of Jesus Christ. So there's a lot of things that can get in the way. We want those things to be removed so people can appreciate who Jesus is and feel like there's less hurdles of evil that exists in the world, or whatever the case may be, someone has trouble with biblical authority, like, oh, I'm not sure really the Bible is a true representation, or, like, did that person Jesus really exist? Some things like that come up. There are reasonable arguments to address these things, and they help clear the way so that people can then have set their eyes on the real Jesus, and then hopefully be able to approach him in a more personal way.
So, so your organization is called Terraform Apologetics, right?
That's correct.
Um, so what do you guys do with that?
Yeah, so it's basically that threefold idea. Right now, here's the beginning. The framework is that the idea terraform is to try and it's science fiction idea, right, or term, and the idea is usually as it's used in science fiction, it's the idea of traveling to other worlds to try and find a world that we can make more suitable for human flourishing. But uh, we take the idea and say, okay, instead of terraforming other worlds, why not take our culture? Why not take our communities here and now and look at ways that we can terraform our communities, we can impact? Because really, the Christian faith isn't just an intellectual thing, and it's not just a social club for us to be in a bubble or a circle, within ourselves, but it's we're meant to be in the world, as Jesus said. We might not be of the world. In a sense, we are, because we're born and we're raised here. But then Jesus saves us, transforms us, and now we're citizens of heaven, right? And so there's this tension that exists between us being in this world and then trying to also represent our home and represent who Jesus is. So terraform is this idea of trying to build more livable communities suitable for human flourishing. And how do we do that? Well, this the apologetics part. Terraform Apologetics is trying to then, through creative expressions and representations of the Christian faith, bring those things together to say, okay, now how can we as good representatives, how can we creatively represent the Christian faith, share the gospel with people so that we can bring terraforming? Because ultimately, as I would say that as has happened with my life, the transformation that took place and the things that I was able to put off, a lot of the old things of just the hatred for, people around me, the utter pursuit of what I want to do with my life and disregard of other people in the process, the treating other individuals as objects for my personal gain. Like, the terraform apologetics part is that transformation that I see took place in me and that I believe Jesus brings to other people's lives can happen in communities. And I've watched, in church communities, I've watched transformation take place. But I've watched in communities how groups of people come together and can bring, if we imagine a better future, we might be able to act towards that idea. And part of this idea of terraforming I get from a brother that I appreciate, a brother in the faith. His name is Jason Petty. He's actually, his stage name is Propaganda. He's a rapper. And so he wrote a book called Terraform. So I borrow the idea from him. I give him some credit for that, big time, because I just started to think, okay, how can we do the same thing? How can I take apologetics? How can I take the Christian faith and then blend these concepts together to say, okay, as Christians, here we are in this world. We are makers of our own culture. We are makers of the world around us. The reason the world is the way it is a lot of it is it's a human invention when you think about it. Like, so much of the world that exists is because they're human artifacts that we develop, we make. So why not take our creativity? God made us in his image and likeness. And so the creative aspect of who we are, why not take that and take our faith, which is true and reflects reality most accurately of any faith, of any philosophy? Why not take and blend these things together so that we can make a more suitable world for human flourishing? Because ultimately, that's what Jesus wants, his desire, his kingdom, where he says his will be done, his kingdom come. For the Father to do that in this world, God's sincere desire is to bring transformation for human flourishing. It's the same concept. And so I want to see what we do. And so that basic idea of terraform apologetics happen in three different ways. Number one is to try and train Christians to share the gospel and do so creatively, to do so personally in their own everyday network of relationships. Number two is to have a creative representation of the faith. And I would say there's an aspect of defending the faith that's in there. That's the apologetics of trying to go out and express in a way that says, here's the Christian faith that's true. And let me come close enough to you that you can respect me and see what I'm doing and appreciate the artistic spin I put on life, so that you can maybe get a clearer picture of who Jesus is. And then thirdly, would be to, our desire is to want to terraform communities. So it's those three things: sharing the gospel, training Christians to share the gospel, training Christians to defend the Christian faith, have a good representation, and training Christians to try and terraform the communities. So right now, what we're working on is I have a course that's been launched online to help train people to share the gospel with confidence and ease. So that's kind of a huge focus for me right now. And I mean, I could talk a whole lot about that as well.
Okay, so it's mainly through the course right now is how it's taking place.
That's correct. Yeah.
Well, tell me more about this course.
Okay. Yeah. So this course is it's an 8 video module, 8
Okay.
separate videos, and they go in length from anywhere from 13 minutes up to 24 minutes or so. And basically, what they do is they take a Christian from, okay, I don't even know what the gospel is. I'm not sure what it is. And so it takes people from, here's the narrative surrounding the gospel and what a lot of people may think about what it is. Here's some misconceptions about it. Let me take you from there to, okay, guess what? You can take and build, you can create your own testimony, write your own testimony of what God has done, kind of like what I shared earlier. You can take your own testimony and share before you were in Christ, how you came to know Jesus, and then since you became a Christian, what God has done in your life. You can take that same storyline in a couple of minutes, be able to explain it as you can write it out, and then explain it in a couple of minutes. That's kind of the design, and weave some verses in there so that you can share with people, in basically any setting. If you're there, you can take it from stage and you could share it. If you're maybe with your friend, you're talking around the water cooler at work, and you can be able to share. If you're sitting down at break, at work, or if you're talking to your neighbor in the neighborhood, or you're part of a mom's group, whatever the case may be, that you're able to share the gospel and feel like you're doing it, but not in a way that, okay, I'm terrified. I need to be the person on the street corner that's preaching the gospel. And so I want people to understand, as I take them through this course, that they can share their testimony and feel comfortable because they're sharing their story. It's a true story, and it's what God has done in their life. And then take them from there to then look at, okay, how do you build bridges? How do you connect? Because a lot of sharing the gospel is all about building relationships. That's really a tremendous amount of it. Yeah, you need to know what the gospel is and maybe how to share it, but there is, I think, a lot more to the gospel than people realize, and I don't think it's maybe not as narrow as people might assume that it is. And it's easy to be able to bring things together to communicate the good news of who Jesus is. That's what gospel means, good news. It's easy to communicate that good news to people about who Jesus is, in a way that I think is personable and relatable. And so then I take people from there throughout the course to understand, okay, here's even how you should involve soul care or self-care. That sharing the gospel, an important part of it is that you are actually making sure that you pay attention to your own self, your own needs. Because this is something that I dealt with as well. But in the church, sometimes we can get this mindset that we have to sacrifice so much for Jesus that we burn ourselves out. And that's actually not the case. Yes, God does call us to a life of love is sacrifice, right? Being able to take the step of the action of loving people, making those choices that equal love are personal sacrifice. That's what's involved. But it doesn't mean that I have to completely abandon all self-care, all soul care. So I want people to find that as a part of if you care for yourself, if you better take care of yourself, then you're better going to be able to communicate the gospel, to terraform your community, to feel like you have more to give and more to offer, more to contribute to the world around you. So I take people to that aspect, um, and then I kind of try to leave them in that place of like, this is what it looks like to bring a transformation, what you can do to begin to brainstorm and work with other people to transform your communities, to begin to take this gospel and then find creative ways on this end to bring that transformation, that terraforming for for human flourishing in your spheres of influence.
Okay, nice. So, with the course and um, all that, are you like working with any churches to do this?
Yeah. So there are a number of churches that I'm building relationships with.
Mhm.
My home church, which is Hyde Wesleyan Church here in Clearfield, Pennsylvania. I'm connecting with the pastor there, and we're trying to develop getting groups of people together, which is one of the things I'm trying to offer this resource to as many people as possible. Okay, because there is a price to it. I'm trying to provide for my family. That's an important, beautiful thing that I get to do. And so part of it is like I want to offer it to groups in churches, and so I'm trying to get individual members. If we get 5, 10 people together in a certain group, then we can offer the course at a discounted rate, and that way I can partner. So I've got there's 4 or 5 church groups that I'm talking to right now that I'm trying to connect with to get a group established to be able to begin this the process of them going through the course almost like on a week by week, like an 8-week study, and then I would meet with them either at some point during the course if they want to meet halfway through or after the fact. That I could meet with them and be able to interact and answer some questions if they have specific questions or if they want some clarification or if they need help. I want to be available to do that as well. So so I'm open to trying to connect with as many pastors, churches, individuals. I want to see people be trained. I want to see this idea grow. And for the church, because here's part of the concept I would say when it comes to right? When you look at Ephesians chapter 4, it talks about there being certain giftings within the church, right? There's apostles, there are prophets, evangelists, and teachers and pastors. And some people kind of link those two things together. But regardless, this is a concept of these office gifts that exist within the church. And so it's kind of like an office representation within the church, like a position that someone might have to help the body. But at the same time, it's also a gifting from the Holy Spirit. So when you think about it, it says that all of those gifts are meant to be for the equipping of the saints, for believers,
Mhm.
for the work of the ministry, right? For the work of service in the body. It's to help build the whole body up. So, however, I mean, every church has a pastor, essentially, right? Or has somebody teaching, essentially. And apostles and prophets, the argument can be made whether it's something that existed a long time ago, whether it exists today. Regardless, apostle was like a missionary of sorts. A prophet is someone who is proclaiming the word. And so those things exist, but there aren't too many, I would say, evangelists. And when I say that, I mean, okay, all of these office gifts are meant to be gifts that are for the equipping of the saints, specifically for the work of ministry, for people to be able to go and multiply the process so that the great commission can be fulfilled, that people go into all the world and make disciples, right? So that
Mhm.
discipleship process, part of that taking place is individuals have to be in some way trained to do that. And so I don't see very many churches with an evangelist or even a collection of churches, right? Local churches working together, where there's a collection of churches that have an evangelist who has this role of, okay, I'm going to come in and help train your people. Let me come in and help equip your people because maybe the pastor, he wants to bring some outside help because the pastor's not supposed to do everything, right? They have a leadership, a shepherding role for
Mhm.
the church, and so each gifting or responsibility within the church needs to be divvied up so that this it can meet the needs of this organism called the church, and the body can grow and flourish. So that flourishing can't take place unless it's not going to be as healthy as what it needs to be unless the different members that are part of that body are contributing in a way that is going to help divide up the responsibility and give all the best to see people absorb and be able to take away and glean from all the beautiful aspects of that church diversity. And so, it's interesting because I see that the lack is there and a need is there for evangelists to be able to step in. I hear about a lot of evangelists going out on the street and sharing the gospel and maybe training someone, say, hey, come out with me on the street and share the gospel. I don't see a lot of evangelists connecting with local churches to be able to establish a bridge and say, let me come in and help you do this. I want to help your people and people that you identify in your church that have an interest that might want to learn how to share the gospel. And really, every Christian should know. And when you think about it, all the giftings that exist in the church, when you read Romans 12, 1 Corinthians 12, Ephesians 4, 1 Peter 4, the places that we find about the gifts, it's interesting because it says all those gifts exist and no one person, Jesus is probably the only person he's the only one for sure. Nobody else has all of the spiritual gifts within the body of Christ. We're all members of each other that need each other. God designed it that way on purpose. So we all need one another with these giftings, right? So, however, in the process, with all these diverse giftings that exist, as we're aiming to be dependent upon one another. We need each other to be able to fulfill God's design for the church. And so he says that we're supposed to be dependent upon each other to be able to make the connection, to be able to grow and flourish and see the body grow. So as you look at those giftings, what's interesting is that Christians are supposed to basically practice all of those things. God, the gift of mercy. It's funny when I found out the gift of mercy is a gift. I'm like, what? Mercy is a gift? Okay. Well, it doesn't mean if I don't have the gift of mercy, I'm not supposed to show mercy. Or faithfulness. Faithfulness is a gift. Or generosity, in giving. So there's these various gifts that exist within the church body. But the interesting thing is we're all commanded to do them. But some of us may have a more enriched representation or expression of that particular gifting. And so we're all commanded, I'll take it full circle back to sharing the gospel. We're all commanded to share the gospel. We're all supposed to share the good news of who Jesus Christ is, right? So all of us are supposed to do that. But this is something that I would say, in a unique way, we're supposed to be equipped to be able to share the gospel because Paul says in Romans 10, how are they going to believe if they don't hear? How are they going to hear if someone doesn't preach? How is someone going to preach if they are not sent? Right? And so that's the whole process that exists. So people have to be sent out, but they need that training to be able to articulate and communicate the gospel, to be able to help other people understand. So that's where I want to step in and kind of fill that void, but build a bridge, train other people to do the same thing. Hey, listen, I want this to be a multiplication process. I don't need to be the only one doing it. Let's band together and I want to try to collaborate with other evangelists to try and see this happen too. So yeah, I want to try to build relationships with churches and do my best to connect.
All right. So, where do you see this going in the future? I'm guessing more churches, church
Yeah,
groups.
right. Yes. Yeah. So I want to see this. The vision I have is for this to develop in a way that they're seeing and having a passion to be able to share the gospel. They're having the people in their everyday network of relationships in mind, and they're building relationships, feeling confident and competent to communicate. And as more of this takes place, okay, then I know as people share the gospel that we're casting a net out there, right? Jesus calls us, we're fishers of men, fishers of people. As we cast that net out there, right, and we're fishing for people and they come to know Jesus, well, then the multiplication process can grow. And I mean, honestly, the big picture down the road is by our godliness and righteousness, according to Peter 3, we're going to hasten the coming of the Lord. The crazy thing is that he actually says that we can hasten, we can quicken the coming of the Lord if we are living our lives as Christ-like, as godly. So, I mean, that's a long-term picture, a big picture is to see that. But prior to that is I want to see this vision grow where other people, they are taking the same idea on that we're fulfilling this aspect of, okay, we're sharing the gospel, and then people are connecting within their churches, and discipleship is taking place because that's critical. I mean, the evangelism process, the sharing the good news is important, but discipleship also has to be in there as well. So I want people to connect down the road, but I think that in terms of my involvement, it's that discipleship can be an aspect of the apologetics, the people being trained to be able to articulate their faith, to be able to express their faith in a way that people see they see the Christian faith as the truest representation of reality. And so, and then that moving on from that discipleship to then, it's that same idea of disciples making disciples, which make disciples, which make, it's that growing process that goes on. And so I think that as that happens in the church in America, we're better prepared for the challenges that are going to be ahead. That are because they're going to be challenges. If we look at scripture and how it talks about, prior to the coming of Jesus, it's going to be more challenging for Christians. So I think that we need to be better equipped and prepared to know what it is that we believe and know why that we believe it and why it's true. So, and I think that in the process, again, that as these things are taking place, that's the terraforming is happening. People are seeing, I fit within the church body. A lot of people think I feel that there are a lot of folks, as I've talked over time, they feel like the church isn't a place for me. There's even this idea, this deconstruction idea, or ex-evangelicalism, or some of these ideas of people right now who are or reevaluating even their faith, where they look at how they were raised and what they grew up with in church. They maybe experienced some spiritual abuse, some hurt in church, and then they maybe come back around in a period of time, or people maybe who are still adrift, they're doing their thing on their journey wherever they are, and God wants them to be able to come back. But it's hard for people to come back to a place, to a subculture where they feel like they've experienced so much hurt. And so I want this terraforming to take place where, I try to be and want to be a very real person. And that's part of what I bring to this idea of terraforming, is that, like, listen, as you're sharing the gospel and you're representing the Christian faith, it doesn't have to be this picture perfect idea of, I don't know, the it doesn't have to be like the cleavers or whatever from from years ago, the picture nuclear family, like, and everybody does everything perfectly. The idea is that we have a lot of hurt, a lot of brokenness involved in our life, but God is still in the work of healing us. Well, healing takes place while you're still going through hurt. And then what happens is we experience healing, and we get to a place where then we can, as we're experiencing healing, we help be a part of someone else's life. But then other hurt comes up too. It's not like we ever come fully to this place of like, oh, I'm completely mature as a Christian and I'm healed of everything, and now I don't have any other issues or problems. Like when I came to Christ, I don't want people to think that God now wrapped everything up with a nice, neat bow and I'm just good to go, Elliott, and there's no problems in life.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. And people don't experience that. So a lot of people who maybe go to church, or they see it as something, they're just kind of there's a frustration with what they might perceive as, this is a facade. I feel like I don't fit in this particular group, in this clique. And so, like, I'm not sure how to get involved, to be involved in a small group in church. There's some of that takes place. I want Christians to feel real, and I want them to feel like they can be a part of the church body, that there's a fit for them, and they can work on, hey, listen, we all need to connect with a couple of folks in a way that we can be, I'm talking seriously vulnerable about life. That we can be honest about, like, listen, my marriage is hard right now. My wife and I are having a difficult time. Or they can talk about my job right now. I'm not sure if I'm going to make it. Like I just got fired, or like I'm not feeling like a man when I look at other men. Look at Elliott. Elliott's got this serious beard going on, and he's rocking a podcast. He looks all into like So it's just all these different hurdles that we can come across that we get trapped in our minds, thinking I need to be like these other people. I'm experiencing, and a lot of times we keep it isolated. We keep it all bottled up. I want people to feel like they can connect in a way that they are there's at least one, two, maybe three people that they can be seriously raw with, and they can emotionally vomit and connect with in a genuine way. Now, we're not going to be able to do that with everybody, and that's okay. However, we should be able to find a couple people that we can really connect with so that we can begin to experience healing. They're just sincerely desiring to mature in their faith, and when they want to grow, and we too are having the same desire, and so we kind of are sharpening each other. There's a mutual desire to want to grow in godliness, and so I just want people. Part of what I want people to understand in the process is that this terraforming aspect has to happen in community. We got to experience, as Christians, we have to experience community. The church is supposed to be the place where that happens. We're supposed to experience beautiful healing and amazing community within the church. Some challenge is going to happen, some hardship, some heartache may happen within the church. But in the same place, we should be able to come back around and connect with people in a genuine way, and an authentic way within the church. In a way that, listen, I see people connecting on the outside and being authentic, but they may not know how to do it they might leave the spiritual aspect out of it. And they're not able to connect in a way of bringing their Christian faith and like, okay, here's how we look to Jesus as the author and perfecter of our faith. Here's how we can, with like-mindedness, according to what Scripture teaches, that we're able to come together and be able to grow in our faith side by side and walk in the spiritual journey. So community is so important, and I want this to happen in churches. So this is kind of what I see as a long-term vision and picture the importance of this terraforming component taking place. And I see the church flourishing and growing in this particular manner. But it's all hands on deck. We all got to work together to try and make this happen. But everybody has their individual part to contribute. So, yeah.
Okay. So last two questions before we wrap up, Taylor.
Yeah.
If someone wants to learn more about sharing the gospel, they should take your course, of course. But other than that, is there any books that you recommend that they read in order to learn how to do that?
Yeah, great books. I recommend Tactics by Greg Kokel. He talks about just some strategic ways of being able to ask questions. That's a good way of being able to get at things, is just to be able to basically put yourself in the driver's seat where someone might be curious and wonder and ask questions, and you're able to basically say, okay, well, what do you mean by that? You're offering some clarification, and well, if Christianity were true, would you become a Christian? So Tactics is a great book. Another one I recommend, I would say, is case making. There's so many in my brain. Okay, I would say that Cold Case Christianity is another good book by J. Warner Wallace. Yep.
Okay. Well, thank you, Taylor. And if someone wants to take the course or is a pastor and wants to connect with you to have you share with their church, how would they get in contact with you?
Okay, so yeah, they can contact me through Facebook. It's probably one of the primary ways. They can call me. All right, I'll just give you my phone number, 814-496-0996. You can give a call to Terraform Apologetics. Another way to connect is through Facebook. So it'd be facebook.com and then /Terraform Story. And then another way is they can go to my website, which we'll have down in the notes, but it would be Terraform Apologetics at mykajabi.com.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Taylor, for coming on the podcast. It's great.
Yeah, thank you, Elliot, for having me. I appreciate what you're doing.